When people talk about the rise of China, they always mention Deng Xiaoping, and they should. Deng was the man who jacked China out of Maoist chaos, crushed dogma under his heel, and kick-started one of the greatest economic boom in modern history. But here's the part nobody wants to talk about. The same man who saved China's economy also doomed its political future. Because while Deng opened markets, he locked down minds. He understood what was broken under Mao, but refused to fix what would eventually break again under Xi. And that's why today in 2025, the same system that Deng rebuilt is now teetering on the edge of collapse. Let's talk about what Deng got right and what he got tragically, irrevocably wrong. First, what Deng Xiaoping got right. He knew Mao's communism was a dead end. Deng had seen it all. The Great Leap Forward, the famines, the Cultural Revolution. He watched China burn from the inside. Ideology over reason, royalty over competence, chaos over order. By the time Deng clawed his way back to power in 1978, he knew one thing for sure. To get rich is glorious. It was a direct rebuke to Maoist poverty worship and ideological extremism. Deng didn't just reject Mao's legacy, he reversed it, and that took guts. So he embraced the markets, even if he didn't say it out loud. Deng never used the word capitalism. He didn't have to. Instead, he gave us brilliantly subversive slogans that masked a full-scale ideological U-turn. For example, ideas like, it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. Cross the river by filling the stones. That some people in China get rich first. Those weren't just slogans. They were escape hatches from the economic grave Mao had created. Deng legalized private farming, allowed foreign investment, and let entrepreneurs build business, first in Shenzhen and then across the nation. In under one generation, he lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, and he did it while still waving the red CCP flag. That's the brilliance and the curse of what Deng built. Capitalism without democracy, modernity without freedom. Also, let's not forget that he outsmarted the West with low-key foreign policy. Deng didn't provoke the West, he played them. He famously said, "Hide your strengths, bide your time." He downplayed China's rise. He kept his head low. He welcomed foreign capital and let American companies in. Cheap labor, big profits, no questions asked. While the West celebrated engagement, Deng was buying time, absorbing knowledge, and building China's strengths quietly. He knew that premature confrontation would wake up the West. So he pretended China was still developing long after it had started dominating. It worked. The West gave China technology, capital, and market access, all while pretending China would one day liberalize. Deng knew better. Now, let's talk about what Deng got horribly, tragically wrong. For all his pragmatism and vision, Deng made 4 fatal mistakes, and they are the reason China is now unraveling under Xi Jinping. Mistake number 1. He refused political reform. This is the original sin. Deng fixed the economy, but refused to touch politics. He loosened the leash on business, but tightened the speech. He opened factories, but closed off civil society. He invited capitalism in through the back door, but slammed the front door on democracy. Tiananmen Massacre was the ultimate expression of this refusal. When students demanded dignity, transparency, and reform, he sent in tanks. He purged Zhao Ziyang erased the memory and built the next era on silence. The unspoken deal was simple. You can get rich in China, but you can never get a vote. And that deal worked until it didn't. Mistake number 2, he built growth on fear, not institutions. Then created explosive growth, but without any legal or institutional foundation to sustain it. Instead of building rule of law, independent courts, transparent governance, media oversight, protections for private property, Deng kept all power centralized inside the Communist Party. Entrepreneurs got rich until the party decided they were too rich. Investors thrived until the CCP rewrote the rules. Companies grew, but were never truly protected. That fear that at any moment the party can undo your success never went away. And today under Xi, it's all consuming. The results? Foreign investors are fleeing, local officials are paralyzed, innovation is drying up, the middle class has stopped spending. Why? Because no one feels safe in a system built on political fear instead of legal rights. Deng didn't build institutions. He built a bonfire and Xi lit the fire. And that brings us to mistake number 3. He turned reform into a one-time miracle instead of a self-renewing system. Deng treated reform like a shock event, not a permanent mechanism. He liberalized the economy, opened markets, and lifted controls once, but he never created a system of continuous feedback, adaptation, or bottom-up participation. In other words, no freedom of speech, no independent press, no academic freedom, no local elections with real power, no platform for new reformers to rise up. He thought reform could be dictated from above, like a command. But real reform requires institutional renewal, checks and balances, a political immune system. So when future problems emerged, like corruption, overbuilding, over-reliance on real estate, the system couldn't self-correct. Xi didn't just kill reform, he stepped into a system that was never built to evolve. Because Deng didn't build a machine, he built a moment. And once that moment passed, there was nothing left to protect it. Now, mistake number 4, he never institutionalized the transfer of power. This one is catastrophic in hindsight. Deng was burned by Mao's dictatorship. He knew the dangers of one-man rule, so he created term limits, collective leadership, retirement age norms, but he never locked any of it in black-letter law. It was all party tradition, fragile, informal, untested. So when Xi Jinping came along, ambitious, ruthless, paranoid, he could easily crown himself emperor without much opposition. He just had to ignore precedent, and nobody could stop him. Deng removed Mao's bad policies, but he didn't remove the system that made Mao possible. And that's how we got Xi. So the collapse we see today, it started in 1989. Look around in 2025 and tell me this isn't the end game of Deng's model. Youth unemployment near 50%, property markets frozen, middle class wealth erased, tax sector crushed, private capital fleeing, state paranoia intensifying, no off-ramp, no opposition, no accountability. Wen Jiabao warned us in 2012. Xi Jinping proved it in the years that followed. But the seeds were planted by Deng Xiaoping in 1989, when he chose tanks over trust, fear over freedom, and power over progress. Let's give Deng some credit. He ended Maoist madness. He opened China to the world. He lifted millions out of poverty. He saved China temporarily. But history is about consequences, and Deng's refusal to build real institutions, allow political reform, is why China never democratized, China never de-risked, and China today is collapsing inward. Deng built the body of a modern state, but he left the brain stuck in the 1950s. Now that brain is cannibalizing the rest. So it's tempting to romanticize Deng Xiaoping, but the truth is more complicated and more tragic. He was smart enough to open the window, but too scared to open the entire door. And in the end, that fear, the fear of reform, of transparency, of real democracy, became CCP's destiny. Now, as Xi Jinping tightens his grip, the world sees what happens when you build a superpower on sand. Deng Xiaoping was a genius, and Deng Xiaoping built a trap. China is walking into it now.